MacVoices is supported by LinkedIn Jobs. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. Pay what you want and get $50 off your first job post at linkedin.com/MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner, and this is MacVoices. And this is the second part of our interview with Peter Cohen, talking about Apple's new hardware releases. In the first part, we talked about the new Mac Mini and the place it has in Apple's product category matrix, and also touched on the first part of the conversation with the new iPad Pro. We were just getting into using that as a productivity machine when we took a break. So here's Peter Cohen. Okay, I wasn't going to go there, but you've taken us there because the upgrade to the iPad Pro and the new version of iOS really does push the iPad Pro to almost a laptop. And we've done, I don't know how many shows talking to a lot of different people about their opinions about this kind of thing as to, can we, should we, do we want to replace our Macs with our iPads? You just gave the example of stuffing it in your shirt pocket or your jacket pocket and being able to take it with you. I tend to think of my whatever devices it's in front of me is more of a workstation where I'm doing a lot of different things. So I get really torn on this. There are times that my iPad is, as far as I'm concerned, the perfect device for the physicality of the location that I'm working in, the fact that maybe I don't want to flip the lid up of a laptop in a meeting and have it seem like I'm behind a wall or anything, whereas for some reason the iPad is just not as intimidating, even a large one. But at the same time, I am like you. I do prefer a Mac for the most part because of the multitasking. Some of that, though, I try to look in the mirror and say, "Gee, is that just because that's what I'm used to?" And
okay, boomer.
Yeah, exactly. Because I watch kids do things with iPads and iPhones. It's like, wow, I still have a long way to go in learning to effectively use that platform. Mm-hmm. Now we have a keyboard and mouse and trackpad support that really, and in fact, they're encouraging it. And your comment about Microsoft, I don't even get me started there because that will not go well. But I do feel like that this may be a jumping off point, a change point, more than I've felt it at any point before. So am I overstating it, Peter, or am I just reading too many opinions on why people love their iPads and want to use a trackpad with them?
Well, I think the iPad has always represented sort of an existential dilemma for Mac users. We've been, it was easy to dismiss the iPad for the first year or two as a content consumption device as opposed to content creation, but it was pretty clear straight from go, especially once Apple started iterating the iPad with the iPad 2, the iPad 3, and so on. And started branching out to different kinds of models, that it was very serious about using it for content creation too. There are still some real glaring holes in how you can attach, let's say, peripherals to the iPad, or the Pro tools in Apple's own arsenal that are missing on the iPad. For example, there's no Final Cut Pro version that runs on the iPad. That is reserved specifically for Mac use. And obviously, the Mac is very well suited to doing that stuff. So there are practical reasons for why that's the case. But, I'm seeing, musicians do multi-track recording on the iPad. I'm seeing people do very sophisticated video work on the iPad. And even my colleagues, who 10 years ago would never have used an iPad for writing long-form content, writing books like complete novels, don't even give it a second thought now. They've turned the corner. They've got the tools that they need. They've developed the workflows that they need. Chuck, the biggest problem that I've got with the iPad is me, because the muscle memory that I've got for being a Mac user now for more than 30 years is so ingrained. It's very difficult for me to shift into what the biggest problem that I've had being an iPad user up until now has been, I can hook up an external keyboard, and I've actually been using external keyboards with my iPads since I got an iPad back in 2010. But when I break the horizontal plane of having my hands on the keyboard to touch the screen, I find that very disruptive to just the way that I work, just the way that I think, and the way that I interact with the content. I would much have preferred to just slide my hand over to a mouse or a trackpad and continue to work. So that's why the Magic Keyboard on the iPad has got me so excited. It's like, okay, finally, I don't need to touch the screen anymore. I can leave the screen pristine. I can goop up the Magic Keyboard and trackpad with buffalo wing sauce. And I don't have to worry about smearing grease all over the iPad Pro screen anymore. That's an incentive for me to look at that. Having said that, it is an adjustment. It is a fundamentally different operating system and a different way of inputting data than you get on a Macintosh. And I think that old dinosaurs like you and me are we're going to have to, I don't know, train ourselves out of it. Maybe we just need a bag of shrooms and a depth tank to flush all that crap out of our heads so we can reboot and start fresh or something. I don't know, but it is a challenge, and I think the mountain moves to Muhammad. Muhammad goes the other way too. Every year, every iteration, we see Apple getting a little bit closer to getting the iPad to be a general purpose computer that anyone can use for anything that they want to. And every year, users, whether they know it or not, are becoming more acclimated to doing that. But the bottom line is, the iPad isn't for everyone, just like the Mac Mini isn't for everyone. And if you're a Mac user and you're comfortable being a Mac user, hey, it's a good thing that Apple's not putting a gun to your head saying, no, you got to buy the iPad Pro now. You can get a Mac and continue to use it. And if the iPad fits in your workflow, awesome. Get started.
Tell me the truth. Have you ever, after, because you go back and forth like I do, have you ever, while using a Mac laptop, reached up and touched the screen, mistaking it for an iPad?
No.
Neither have I. I've not even been tempted to do it, Peter. And that's the one thing that I find fascinating with all the discussion about the people that seem to want a combination of device, or that think that the Microsoft Surface is such a wonderful thing.
Here's the thing, though, Chuck. I used to sell these things, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, I had countless numbers of customers who would come in, take a look at the iMac, and start pressing the screen to get things to happen. Mm-hmm. So you and I, we can't infer anything from our own experience. We're inside of a very specific box. There are a lot of people out there who have come to computing through mobile devices and have come to Apple products through mobile devices, first with the iPhone and then later with the iPad. And they just absolutely expect and are normalized to the idea of inputting by touching the screen, as opposed to using a mouse or keyboard. And in fact, find a mouse or mouse or trackpad, difficult to use because it's not a muscle memory they've built up. So I understand and respect that. And I just, so the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard presents sort of an interesting hybridization.
LinkedIn Jobs is supporting MacVoices. You know what makes your business go and grow? Good people. Good salespeople, good service people, good design people, good marketing people. Pick a function at your company, and it's the people behind it that make it great. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs is so important. LinkedIn Jobs not only helps you find the right people, but it helps you find them easily. That's important since you have one or two other things to do during the day. I'm on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn. Or you should be. If someone in business isn't on LinkedIn, I tend to ask why, and then I go to the next person who is. That's because I know that the candidates on LinkedIn are screened for hard and soft skills to make the hire not just fast, but right. There's a reason that LinkedIn Jobs is rated the #1 hiring platform for delivering quality hires. And that same reason is why someone is hired every 8 seconds with LinkedIn. Tap into that power as you make your next hire. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. You can pay what you want and get the first $50 off. Just visit linkedin.com/MacVoices. Again, that's linkedin.com/MacVoices to get $50 off your first job post. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks to LinkedIn Jobs for their support of MacVoices.
On the other issue that comes up all the time, like I said at the start of my extended monologue on this, the iPad presents, or has presented for a while now, sort of an existential concern to Mac users. Every time Apple updates either iOS, branching out iPad OS last year, this came up, or updates Mac OS with new features, somebody out there has to start wagging their finger and saying, it's the iOSification of the Mac. The Mac is becoming nothing more than a big iPhone or a big iPad. No, stop that. Find a new thing to complain about, because that isn't real. Apple understands fundamentally that Mac users use their devices differently, have different expectations and different workflows than iPad users or iOS users. They blur those lines when they make sense. Perfect example of that is I found a recipe that I wanted to make the other night on my Mac because, quite frankly, I'm more comfortable doing searches and, stuff like that on my Mac still. I found a great recipe that I wanted to try. Just left it on my Mac screen, went over to my iPhone, went down to the kitchen, pulled it out, pulled up Safari and saw that page was sitting right there on my MacBook Pro and my list of pages. Opened it up, that's handoff. Apple's had that technology now for a few years on the Mac and iPhone and iPad. It works beautifully. It makes it very easy for me to take a phone call right here on my Macintosh instead of ever having to whip out my phone. So Apple understands where the lines can be erased completely or where they can be blurred, and makes it easy, because their idea here is that you and the information that you want is the central thing. The device really, at the end of the day, should be as invisible as possible. That doesn't mean that the device isn't important or the way that you use the device isn't important, but the device itself shouldn't get in the way of you getting the info that you need and you getting your work done. And that's something I think that Apple does better than anyone else in tech.
I agree with that completely. In both that the device should not get in the way, and Apple does it better than anyone else. And that statement alone should make a lot of us sort of step back and rethink how we're doing it, and whether we're holding on to old ways of doing things, not old tech necessarily, just old workflows and productivity tips, and maybe look at some of the new ones and some iPad-centric new ones. So. Yeah, that's very good insight. Very, very good insight. So let's get to the last one, the MacBook Air, because I know that this was something that a lot of people have been waiting for, not just because of the refresh time, but for no other reason than because of the keyboard.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense that the next one out of the gate after the 16-inch MacBook Pro would be the MacBook Air, because the MacBook Air is Apple's best-selling laptop. People love the MacBook Air. People can't get enough of the MacBook Air, and it's a wonderful machine. Apple put the new Magic Keyboard in there, which is great. I wondered if they were going to do that one or a smaller MacBook Pro first. So I'm glad to see it happen. But they also lowered the price. They lowered the price to $999. That particular model is a little horsepower limited. It's a dual core i3 processor, so it's not the fastest Mac on the block, but it's also $999. So they've got a MacBook Pro now that's available for under $1,000, $900 if you're in education. If you're a teacher or a student or the parent of a student interested in picking up a laptop, now you can get one for $900. It's a great deal. CPU performance has been improved. Graphics performance is dramatically better in some cases, and it also starts with with twice the storage it did before. So Apple beefed up the storage on the Mac Mini, but it also beefed up the storage on the MacBook Air. So you're getting a minimum of 256 gigs of storage capacity now, which is good because Apple has been parsimonious, and I still think 256 is parsimonious. This is not as bad as it was before. You know, Apple wants us all to use the cloud for everything, I guess.
Yeah, and that too has, that's a whole separate show about, the fact that if you're sitting in Cupertino or New York City or Chicago, you probably are bathed in Wi-Fi and high quality cellular. But if you're in the middle of Missouri or Oklahoma, maybe not so much.
Yeah, or if you're a kid, in a classroom, and you've got very significant restrictions on how you can use your device, it pays to have more storage than having to depend on the school's crappy Wi-Fi or whatever the mobile device management technology that they're using has limited your online access to be. So yeah, there are a lot of reasons why Apple should be providing a lot more storage, but the bottom line is that they are. The great thing about this is the MacBook Air, it has been redesigned with the new Magic Keyboard, but it's not beefier than it was before. It's still a very elegant, very thin machine that'll fit inside anybody's backpack. And it actually, if I recall correctly, Chuck, I'm not looking at the specs at the moment, but I do believe that Apple's actually diminished the battery life on this just slightly compared to where it was before. So you're not getting quite the same length of time per battery charge that you were before, but the payoff is that you're getting a much better performing machine that's a little bit beefier.
Whatever you're looking to do online, you can build it on Linode. But not just build it, provision, secure, monitor, and back it up too. Linode is a full-service hosting operation with 10 data centers around the world, with their newest in Toronto now open, and the next coming in Mumbai by the end of the year. And Linode isn't just a hosting operation, they are a world-class hosting operation, with SSD storage, a 40 gigabit network, and industry-leading processors powering their servers. If you know what you want, you can dig right in. Or you can let Linode do some of the setup for you with their easy one-click installs of a variety of servers. Find out what Linode can do for you by visiting linode.com/MacVoices and using the offer code MacVoices2019 to get $20 off your first purchase. That's linode.com/MacVoices and the code MacVoices2019 to take $20 off your first server. It won't be your last. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices.
I've got one of the original MacBook Airs with the one with only one USB-C port. And so, I've been looking at this one too, because this again fits a completely different work case or use case than my MacBook Pro 16-inch. This is the one that I can take all day away from a power source and use effectively. And I have to tell you, even with my original, the very original MacBook Air, I'm still kind of surprised by just a little bit of thinking and judicious use of cloud storage, how easily I can work from that machine. So, I agree with you. Naturally, I want more and more memory and more storage. But depending on what you're doing, well, you just said it earlier, that the problem with the iPad Pro is you. And I feel like here, one of the challenges of this new way of working with this particular machine with those limitations is us and the way we've done it before.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of throwing out old bad habits can help out a lot. I'm always tempted to, beef up a Mac with as much storage as I possibly can, because I'm just a digital pack rat and don't want to put, anything in cold storage. But, ultimately, that's my problem, not Apple's to solve. I think it's interesting also that Apple incorporated for the first time on the MacBook Air Touch ID. There's a Touch ID sensor here. The T2 chip is built in as well, so it's very secure. It's encrypted. Your SSD is encrypted. Having said that, there's no touch bar. The touch bar is still something that's very specific to the MacBook Pro. So you still have a physical function key row, but just on the end, there's a Touch ID sensor, so you can use it to unlock your MacBook Air, make Apple Pay purchases on your Mac, and do those other things that Touch ID sort of simplifies. But Apple's also beefed up some options too. For example, you can beef this thing up with if you want to configure to order again from Apple, you can go with a quad-core i7 chip. And a quad-core i7 chip with 2 terabytes of storage, and maxing out the RAM on this thing, you've got a MacBook Air that you can actually do some very powerful video editing with. You can do some very powerful multi-track audio recording. All you would need, potentially would be a Thunderbolt 3 or USB-C based breakout box, maybe for exotic inputs if you needed it. But you can actually do some really good stuff with the MacBook Air, where the MacBook Air was a good general purpose computer, but maybe not high horsepower enough to really worry about when it come to doing this other stuff. It was still very much the domain of the MacBook Pro. At the end of the day, after I looked over the specs of the MacBook Air, I'm like, wow, where is Apple going to go with a smaller MacBook Pro from here? We've heard tell that Apple might be doing a 14.1-inch MacBook Pro. I opined on that myself for a website that I was writing for a couple of months ago. I think it'd be interesting, but Apple really didn't give itself a lot of runway here for a smaller MacBook Pro. The MacBook Air has really kind of stepped into that in a very significant way. And stylistically, it's funny because, you can get it in the pretty colors. So it's sort of stepped into that designer look that the 12-inch MacBook, which Apple discontinued, sort of pioneered as well. So Apple is really trying to make the MacBook Air appeal to a lot of different people. People who, might be looking for, a sleek executive laptop to use on the go. People who are looking for a daily driver to get all of their professional work done on the Mac. Students, families. Just anybody would do well with one of these. And all the reviews that I've read have just been glowing. It seems like people really don't have a lot of complaints about the way that this thing's set up.
Yeah, and I've not done the research. I thought about this last night and I just haven't taken the time to look, but trying to compare the speed benchmarks of this machine with machines we have used in the past. And, this is supposed to be, at least to some ways of looking at it, almost an entry-level Mac laptop, and yet it probably smokes what used to be the pro-level Mac laptops of not that many years ago, with the possible exception of some of the graphics chips. So, yeah, we're right back to just what we said earlier. It's one of the bottlenecks is us. So you need to learn how to use these things and use them better and maybe use them more efficiently, because they're all just wicked powerful. And they put so much power in your hands for whatever you're doing: creativity, productivity, business, music, filmmaking. It's sort of amazing what we have access to right now.
It really is. It really is. So kudos to Apple for a very strong MacBook Air introduction at a time when a lot of people, are looking to either to replace older laptops or maybe incorporate a laptop into their workflow for the first time.
Agreed. Peter, thanks for the analysis and the thoughts. A lot of good things I hope folks will pay attention to and take away from this, especially if they're in the market for 1, 2, or 3 of the new devices. Because, why not? Why shouldn't you buy them all?
Exactly.
Yeah. So where do we find you now when you're not here providing all the wisdom that you provide?
You can usually find me on Twitter at Flarg, Flargh, and I also have a website at peter-cohen, Cohen.com, and you'll also see my byline come up from time to time on various Apple news and technology sites as well, so keep your eyes peeled.
Yep, and when you see that byline come up, you should definitely read it, folks. No question about it.
Thanks, Chuck.
Peter, thanks so much for the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. We will be back with more soon. Thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. you will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.